suppose we start with optimism and the hope that we will have clear skies and no rain or minimal rain for the next 10 days. That weather outlook is obviously what we've hoped for, and now what we're counting on in terms of strategy is a gradual lowering of the lake levels, perhaps Lake Monona at about a half an inch a day for the next couple of weeks. All that gets us is to a point where we hopefully can get all of our streets reopened and the flooded areas along the shorelines of Brittingham Bay, the Ohio River, Wingra Creek, and the southern ends of Lake Monona and Monona Bay. Let me stop for a moment and just address the issue of sandbags. Even if we were to see those reductions over the next couple of weeks, that doesn't mean in another 2 to 3 weeks with heavy rains that we wouldn't have similar problems. And I want to make the point that we're going to be under this kind of stress at least through the spring. It depends upon what kind of snow we get, what kind of patterns of freezing, and then rains in the spring. But until the lake levels can be significantly lowered, we will continually be under threat from any significant rainstorm. That said, with clear weather for a couple of weeks, one of the things we're now working on is the removal of sandbags. Won't start for a couple of weeks, but it's our hope that if this clear weather sustains, we will have a curbside pickup plan for sandbags. The details will go out, and what will happen is if there's area flooding at the time outside of Madison, we will send the sandbags where needed elsewhere here in southern and south central Wisconsin. If the sandbags do not need to be reused, the sand will be recycled and used in our normal winter program of salting and sanding city streets. Those sandbags that have been contaminated, those will be taken as any contaminated soil is and landfilled appropriately. Effective in just, well, by the time this is broadcast, by 4 p.m. today, Friday, we will officially close City of Madison boat launches at Old Brick Law and Olin Parks. Now, we still have some street closures. First Street is open. We've got 2 lanes in both directions, as is East Washington, where all the lanes are presently open. But we've got challenges at Johnson Street and some of the streets that abut some of the creeks and bay areas. And again, all this will be found on the city website. East Johnson will be closed. It's hard to estimate when we'll be able to reopen East Johnson. Let me say that if we can see Lake Monona lowered at a half an inch a day, within 6 days, perhaps we'll be able to get 1 lane open in each direction. And then it might take another week to get the 2nd lane open. Once we can get East Johnson open in each direction, we will most likely be able to then lift the parking restrictions on Baldwin Street, on Williamson Street. Right now, we've posted that to continue with the modifications in parking, with the restrictions, till a week from today, till next Friday. But again, the length of that is dependent upon when we can get a lane open on Johnson Street. And I might point out that yesterday we saw the consequences of bad things happening with the limited accessibility through the isthmus. We had a car bounce off of a city bus. It went across 2 lanes of outbound East Washington, spun into the inbound lanes, and fortunately there weren't multiple vehicles involved, but it closed off most of East Washington until we got that cleared out, meaning at that point, Williamson Street was really the only continual street that gave us access from the east side to the downtown and the state capitol, and obviously heading to the west. We will continue with our free evening parking in the garages. We want to remind people, be careful where you store your vehicles during the evenings, though again, we're optimistic about no or very limited rain for the next 10 days. The other thing is, as we've coped with major activities, marathons, Taste of Madison last weekend, the big question mark for us was what's going to happen with Ironman. With us today are Ryan Richards, the Ironman Wisconsin race director, and Jamie Patrick, who's the vice president of the Madison Area Sports Commission. We feel really good about Ironman for Sunday. We've got some tweaks that had to be made, but why don't you guys come and share the good news about the swim and the modest rerouting of the bicycle portions.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. First, just the ability to work with the city as well as the rest of Dane County to make these changes to allow for us to put on a full race is something we're very thankful for and very appreciative of. I know that everybody's stretched thin, and for us to be able to work with everybody to make a manageable course for both the community as well as our athletes is very appreciative. So a couple of minor tweaks. Obviously, the water level is very high at Law Park. We shifted the start and the finish of the swim about 100 meters, so it's a very minor change. They'll simply enter the water and exit the water about 100 meters away from where they normally do. It's away from the Monona Terrace. The second change is on the bike course. We typically use the bike path underpass underneath John Nolan Drive and Olin Avenue. Because of the flooding, obviously, we are unable to do that because they're both underwater. So we worked through a reroute using the Capital City Trail to head south out of town and get onto the road at Nob Hill Road. So we're right underneath the belt line. Madison Area Sports Commission did an extensive outreach program for us of the hotels and those businesses that are impacted right at John Nolan Drive, the Sheridan Hotel, the Clarion, and the Holiday Inn right there. And they all understand the circumstances we are under, and we will be working with Madison Police Department to allow cars in and out of there as soon as it's safe for for those cars to move about with the bikes. We've also provided them a schedule of the day of anticipated riders, when there will be no delays, when there could be potentially long delays coming and going from those properties, so they're aware of it and can make the guests aware of it. Fortunately, most of the guests are there and are here for the race, so there's not a lot of check-in and check-out from those hotels. Once the bikes are south of the Beltline and have done the little Nob Hill and Badger Road detour, the rest of the bike course is as we had planned. The county has done an unbelievable job working with us to make sure the roads are repaired as they would have had to do for the community, but and we've been working with them to help clean up, do some sweeping and road work and clean up there. And then the bikes will come back the same way using that bike path as well. And then for the run course, it's going as planned. We're watching, obviously, the water levels of Lake Mendota near the UW campus, but we're confident with our weather forecasts that everything will be fine and ready to go for the run portion. So we are expecting a full distance race of 2.4 miles in the swim, 112 miles on the bike, and 26.2 miles on the run course. So.
Jamie, anything you want to add?
I would echo Ryan's comments that it's been great to have the city collaborate on this project in the county. It's an important race to our community. Obviously, there's a lot of losses and devastation throughout the flooding, but Ironman has inspired us for years, and I think this allows us to take our minds off that for a little bit on Sunday as we see people trying to achieve their goals. And so we're thankful for the collaboration and Ironman continuing to give back to some of those groups volunteering at the event and other ways throughout the community to help support the event. So a testament to everybody coming together to help make the city run efficiently. So thank you.
Questions?
How's Monona Terrace holding up? Is there any damage to that infrastructure that you know of?
We're doing all right at Monona Terrace. We've got the perimeter sandbagged, and we're keeping obviously close eye on the water level there, but Monona Terrace is just fine.
And what about the bike path?
Bike path gets a little sloppy at the approaches to Monona Terrace, and at some points you could use water wings or flippers instead of bicycles, but it works.
The setup down by the Monona Terrace, all those on the bike path, is that, maybe I have the route wrong, but is that tied to Ironman in any way, or is that just to preserve the bike path?
It's to preserve the bike path and to prevent erosion from some of the green space that is so close to Lake Monona. It obviously helps with Ironman as well. But, we put that protective barrier up almost at the beginning of the storm. I think it's been almost a week and a half now.
A question about Ironman. What's the significance of moving the swim start and finish 100 meters? What benefits does it have?
Excuse me. Part of it was just to work with the city with the barriers they have up there as well, working around the sandbags, but also the normal water approach that we have used historically is where a portion of the land kind of moves out farther, juts out further into the lake. So the depth of where the swimmers would enter the water is just much deeper. So there's actually a little beach down a little bit that we'll be using. It's just a little bit more gradual. It's an area that's sort of cut back a little bit, so we have just a little bit more real estate to hold the athletes prior to the swim start.
When they transition from the swim to the bicycle, this is probably going to add about a minute and a half, 2 minutes to the time.
Yeah. So they'll have to run that extra distance of about 100 meters. So that won't impact their swim time, but it does impact their transition time, as the mayor referenced. So it's all part of the race, and we've been conveying it all along to them so that everyone's aware of it.
Have you guys ever dealt with anything like this, weather related, having to change courses so last minute?
No, fortunately. This is a very unique circumstance. We're above the 100-year floodplain right now. We've always had to make some minor changes here and there due to road construction or things like that, but luckily the Ironman Wisconsin race has not had to make any changes due to any weather issues.
Is some of the sanitary sewer construction going on part of flooding, particularly at Olin Turtle?
The Olin Turtle, let me see if I got my notes on that here.
It's under the street bike path closure.
Street bike path closure, Olin Turtle, there we are. So we're making repairs to a sanitary sewer at the park. Complete details and a detour map are on our website. Work is expected to be completed today.
Was that a result of the weather and flooding, or was that a separate thing?
It was related. It's an old pipe, but it's about 10 feet away from Wingra Creek. So the high water put a little more pressure on the pipe than it could stand, and it collapsed. And so we're working on a bypass system right now, and that'll be done by the end of the day. And the settlement is basically sand around the pipe is flowing in that hole, and then the manhole and the surrounding ground settle as a result. So.
Was this the only sanitary sewer that has been affected by flooding? This was the first, I guess, I heard of. I could have missed others.
We have found three, I don't know if I'd call them failures because they didn't fail. We caught them in time, but we have found three weak links in our system that this flooding has brought out, and we have corrected all three of those.
So there's no, as far as the consequence of those,
No consequence because they were all caught in time.
Clearly.
Both the city and Madison Met have been monitoring levels in the sanitary system throughout this. And those monitoring, both by us and by Madison Met, is where we caught these issues before they became critical.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Have any homes on the isthmus been affected by flooding directly? Has there been foundation collapse or the garden units getting
There
flooded?
hasn't, on the isthmus, there hasn't been anything of that sort reported to us. We've got homes that are using sump pumps, always have, and in some instances, the sump pumps have not been able to handle the capacity of the water, leaving to some accumulation of if not water, moisture in the basements. But we have not seen the kind of extensive damage that we saw in the University Avenue flooding or the flooding between Odana and Mineral Point Road when that reservoir filled up. Doesn't mean to say that there's more, and there's going to be some assessments done later. For example, you'll notice that some of the buildings on East Washington Avenue not only have sandbags, but they've got plastic or tarps on the first 3 or 4 feet of the building. That's because cars going through at high speeds are creating waves, and the continual presence of the water hitting those buildings can cause some deterioration. But a lot of this will have to be evaluated after we get into recovery, when we start doing inspections. But we haven't seen anything, like I said, that we saw in these other areas, or, for example, the building on Schrader Road, where all the electrical installations were located below grade and got washed out.
In the beginning, you mentioned something, we're going to be kind of in the stress level until the springtime. What does that mean? Are we going to be meeting with you on a weekly basis, hearing about what's going
I
on?
hope not. No, we will just simply have to watch what happens. We'll have to see when we get to Thanksgiving, we get to the period around the holidays, and the lakes freeze. Well, there's still moving water below the ice, and then we'll start seeing things warm up in February and March. When that happens, with additional rains, we could have problems. There's no way of predicting it, but we just have to be aware that with the lakes at such high levels now, it is going to take a while before we get those lake levels down, that we can go from day to day, week to week, without being overly concerned.
Do you think that means people might, keep your sandbags heavy or handy until the springtime?
I don't think it's necessary to keep the sandbags handy until the spring, because we do intend to start collection this fall. But under a worst-case scenario, we could go through this in the spring. I hate to say it, but it's not out of the question. All right? Yeah.
I'm just going to say, as you probably spoke to this before a previous press conference, but as mayor, how do you feel the city is handled? How do you feel city crews have kind of handled this kind of unprecedented
Well,
flooding?
it's really been exceptional in terms of the way they've come together. And there's parts of this that most folks don't see. They see the result. For example, I think we've had like 350,000 hits on the website in regards to the flooding map, which every day some folks check in terms of how they're getting to and from work and school and everything else. Making that work is got a whole lot of people touching it, and activities that have been routine in previous years. For example, the IT work simply creating those maps, the work for the people who are involved with geographic information systems. Then there's the connection between traffic engineering, and those IT people, and putting this all together. then there's a response from both streets and parks in dealing with the flooding and working in the flooded neighborhoods. Then we have to add to that the vigilance of public health, watching what's happening with the standing water, watching what's happening with the lakes. And by the way, we didn't mention in terms of Ironman, one of the things that we did was we tested the water quality of Lake Monona to make sure it was safe for swimmers, and it is. And that's the public health department. We've got a dozen agencies. Besides, people usually think of police and fire. Well, there's 10 other agencies, and I know I haven't mentioned all of them, that have made this happen. The work of parking utility in making the spaces available in the evenings. Madison Metro has been very active in having to respond in terms of bus routes, but also being available in terms of if we would have needed them in any evacuation situation. So I think, city staff has just been as great as we knew they were, and this is why we maintain a high level of training and of investment in infrastructure, so that when something like this happens, we're not totally disabled in terms of support. I mean, there's things that are going on every day. I mean, you take that situation I described that occurred yesterday. We've got Johnson Street closed off. We've got East Washington with an accident that crossed into both the outbound and the inbound lanes. Only Williamson Street as a continued access point from downtown across the Ohio River available to us. That had to be available for transportation systems. It had to be available for police and fire, emergency vehicles coming in from out of town, all of that. And we're functioning, we're working, and we'll be in a great recovery mode in the next month or two.
Real quick one, so about public health, I know that they've been testing the water throughout this week. I think they tested yesterday with some results expected today. Do you know the latest?
Well, I do know that the continued testing on Lake Monona is fine.
Okay.
That was something we've done several times in anticipation of the Ironman event, because we certainly don't want swimmers in water that they shouldn't be in. And so that was critical. And we've also tested some of the standing water in regards to mosquitoes. And I have not seen the results of those. But in some of the areas where we've had continual standing water, we've done some testing, particularly for the types of, I was going to say the brands, the types of mosquitoes that carry certain diseases.
Would anything be done to control the mosquito population?
Well, if we have any breeding from mosquitoes that transmit infectious diseases, yes, then there would be treatment for the larvae. Yep.
But nothing for the mosquitoes that are already out, like no spray?
If it's just more mosquitoes the size of Buicks in greater frequency attacking us, sorry. Nope.
For the gentleman from Ironman, one last question. It seems like, with this unprecedented rainfall, this flooding, it could have just been easier to say, let's cancel it. What's led to the dedication to make sure that we're pulling off this event?
Obviously, I mean, you don't want to go through years and years of planning like we have, from year 1 to year 2 and all the way up to year 17 now, to cancel a race. Nobody wants to do that. Myself as a race director, I don't want to have to do that. This is my job to figure out ways to put this race on. The dedication of the athletes, the dedication of our several thousand volunteers who are ready to come out and support these athletes. It's better for everybody to figure out a way to produce this event than to cancel this event. And that's obviously, we're going to see the result of that on Sunday. We'll have about 2,500 people that are registered for the race right now.
And with their families and friends and
Yep.
cheering sections,
Yeah.
What are we up to? Close
I-
to 15,000?
Yeah, we'll probably, we're around 15 to 20,000 probably in the downtown area. That's the largest congregation during the bike course. Obviously, it's a much, bigger geographic area. People can spread out, but the concentration near the Monona Terrace, State Street, and the Capitol Squares where our largest population is for the race. And we'll be in that 15 to 20,000 range easily.
And you mentioned that, you guys talked to hotels and businesses that were impacted by this. Were there any participant, as you talked about, family, friends are all coming in town where, they had to contact you guys and a hotel was flooded and now they have to find a new place to stay?
Maybe Jamie can speak better to that. I have not heard of anything from a hotel standpoint.
Some hotels have obviously been affected by the flooding, but the hotel community works really well together, and anybody that may have been displaced for the race has been found a new home, so they could still all come to attend the event.
Okay.
One of the secrets that we don't share very often about the hotel community is that when a hotel gets filled or a hotel is not able to meet its obligations, they are actually, despite being competitors, all on the same team, and they all work back and forth in terms of taking each other's customers when you have a situation where there's a room shortage. So the hotels, they may be competitors, but as a team, they've just worked great to make this event successful.